This podcast contains graphic content and may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is strongly advised.
True North True Crime is produced on the territories of the Coast Salish people.
You know, if this happened to somebody that lived on Tori Street that she didn't even know, or if this happened to one of her friends or whatever, she would fight this to the bitter end. I know that about her. And I'm asking her friends and family and the public and community to stand with me and my family and help us continue this fight and help us to continue to shed light on this situation and this case and the injustice that took place here.
It's every person's worst nightmare. The idea of a stranger walking into your home with the sole intention of doing you harm. It's like something from a movie, and not something that happens in real life. But in Surrey, British Columbia, this nightmare became a reality, and the truth underneath this case reveals a broken system that continues to release violent offenders into our communities across Canada. On June 16, 2024, at approximately 10 p.m., first responders from the Surrey RCMP responded to a residence near the 9800 block of 182A Street and found a woman inside her home with life-threatening injuries. Paramedics arrived and transported her to a nearby hospital for treatment. Despite life-saving measures, the woman succumbed to her injuries. Following a search of the area by additional police responders and the Integrated Police Dog Service, a suspect was located and taken into police custody. In this episode, we are discussing the murder of Tori Dunn, and you are listening to True North True Crime.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of True North True Crime. Whether you are a longtime listener or new to True North True Crime, we want to welcome you and thank you for tuning in. For those of you who want more True North True Crime for $5 a month, you can get early access to the podcast on Mondays instead of Thursdays, plus ad-free listening and bonus content if you sign up for TNTC Plus on Apple Podcasts or over on Patreon. If you'd like to try TNTC Plus for free, there is a free 7-day trial option on Apple Podcasts that you can go check out. We want to remind you that our regular release episodes of True North True Crime are always free and come out every 2 weeks on Thursdays. If you've got a case suggestion for us, you can reach out at truenorthtruecrime@gmail.com. We do prioritize cases from family members or close contacts of a case, but consider all suggestions. Okay, let's go ahead and get into this week's episode.
So in this episode, we were talking about the June 2024 murder of Tori Dunn. On the evening of June 16, 2024, RCMP and emergency services were called to Tori's residence after her partner called 911 to report an attack that occurred inside of their home. Tragically, 30-year-old Tori Dunn succumbed to her injuries. This case has been held up as an example of what some are calling the catch and release system in Canada. And while the laws in question being applied are all across Canada, it appears to be more acute in British Columbia, where it seems that every day a new violent offender is released into the community, sparking news stories and public outrage. This episode was challenging to put together for a number of reasons. The first being, obviously, that this is the tragic death of a 30-year-old woman killed by a stranger, and it's just hard to talk about. The second issue is that this murder just happened and is nowhere near a trial. As a result, we want to be mindful that we do not release details that may impact the trial. So to do this, we have spoken to people close to the case. The last issue that comes into play here is that catch and release is a bit of a political hot potato. We try to do our best to be apolitical on the podcast. We do this so we never distract from the real stories that we're trying to tell, which is the story of the victim. So we just try to keep politics out of it. So, catch and release is a critical expression that's used to define a person being arrested and then immediately released with a piece of paper that promises that they will keep the peace and then show up for a court date at a later time. On a grander scale, it also includes individuals who plead down their offenses or convicted individuals who serve the bare minimum of their sentence. Now, there are people who support these justice reforms, and there are those who do not. The whole thing has become quite political. Sadly, as much as we don't want this to be a political episode, we are going to have to talk about the policies that kind of got us here. This will be challenging as it will speak directly to policies that were put in place by the federal and the provincial governments. We wanted to be as informed as possible about this, so over the last few weeks, we have had many off-the-record conversations with a variety of people who hold different positions inside of the justice system to understand what they are seeing on the ground, in the courts, and in real time with regards to the so-called catch and release system. We also spent a considerable amount of time reading various bills, Supreme Court decisions, and parts of the criminal code. But even after all of this work sussing out the causes and effects, we want to be clear that we're not experts on this, and this is like way above our pay grade, so to speak. But that's for a little bit later in the episode, which is more importantly about Tori Dunn. To put this episode together, we used publicly available news articles and court documents. And we also spoke at length with Aron Dunn, who is Tori's father. Aron and Tori's family have fiercely advocated for Tori and are demanding change and answers at the highest levels of government. We want to thank Tori's family and community for trusting us with their story. As an additional content warning, this episode deals with the murder of a 30-year-old woman.
Tori Dunn was born in the city of Comox on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, on December 30th, 1993. She was raised in the community of Parksville, British Columbia by her mom Laura and her father Aron. Tori has an older brother Lee and a younger brother Colby. Aron worked in sales for many years, but unfortunately, Aron and Laura's relationship would come to an end and the two decided to split. Aron moved from Parksville to the Lower Mainland, specifically to Surrey, British Columbia. Around middle school, Tori decided to move over to Surrey to live with her father Aron. In Surrey, Tori attended Sullivan Heights Secondary School. We asked Aron about Tori's early life.
Well, she was born in Comox, and we resided in Parksville. And she immediately made friends in diapers that she still has today that were at the funeral and her vigil and are helping us in our cause still. They stuck together through all the years. There's like a couple, two in particular, Jade and Soraya. They're close friends from childhood, that from the island, that spent a lot of time with her still to this day. She went to elementary school in Parksville, and then shortly thereafter, she moved with me to Surrey. Went to junior high and high school and graduated.
After Tori moved to the mainland, Aron and Tori had a predictable adjustment period. They dealt with the typical relationship challenges that can arise between a teenage girl and a dad. But overall, Aron said she was a great kid who made friends easily.
She had a big heart. Like, she would have done anything for anybody. Like, she was the type of person that, would give you the shirt off her back, would always include you. She was all inclusive. She was her energy was always very positive. She loved life.
After graduating high school, Tori started working as a landscaper. Eventually, she developed a real talent for the work. This led her to start her own landscaping business. Aron told us more about her evolution from landscaping apprentice to a successful business owner. And you can hear the pride in his voice when he talks about her accomplishments.
She finished high school and she started landscaping for a fella in White Rock, and soon discovered that she could do this on her own, and started her business out of the back of her CRV, believe it or not. And she was tenacious, and she was a go-getter. And she'd get paid and buy a new tool, and then go back to work and get paid and buy a new tool. And at the end of it, she had a 3/4 or a 1-ton Ford truck, 4-door Ford truck with a the double axle pull behind enclosed trailer full of tools and a bunch of tools in the garage too. Like she went for it, and she just landed a couple nice contracts with strata councils where they pay good money. So she was doing well. She was doing well enough that a couple of years ago she traveled all over the world. She went to 4 different countries, in Thailand and Vietnam and Malaysia, Philippines.
Tori opened Dunn Wright Landscaping Services in 2019, and that's Dunn Wright as in Dunn. From what we have heard, Tori was a great boss who went out of her way to give opportunities to friends or people who needed work. She was generous about giving her time and resources to people in her life who may have been struggling.
Yeah, she would have done anything to help people. Actually, I don't want to get into naming names, but she had some friends of hers that were in trouble throughout the years with drugs or one thing or another, that she kind of took under her wing and encouraged them and supported them, because she wasn't that person, right? She wasn't into hard drugs or over drinking and stuff like that, right? So she helped a lot of people, and then in the end, I guess sometimes people hurt you, so she decided to foster dogs instead, and she started fostering dogs about 8 months before she was murdered. And yeah, she's just an all around good woman. And I'm grateful forever to have spent the 30 years I got to spend with her. That's for sure.
As some of our listeners may know, we are big animal lovers ourselves with our 2 cats at home and a rescue dog, so we completely relate to the love and compassion that Tori gave her animals. In October of 2023, she took to Facebook and made a personal post about her pets. I made the decision to put my animals first the day I rescued and adopted them. Just like a newborn child, they are family, not an object or just fun for the time. Would you give up your baby for adoption because your house is too small, your landlord doesn't like kids, or they grow out of their cute stage, or come with a set of challenges? I sure hope not. It absolutely sickens me the amount of animals I've seen being released to a shelter, etc., since the COVID restrictions have lifted. Animals aren't there for our temporary pleasure. If that's the case, go to a farm for a day. You make a commitment for the rest of their lives when you rescue, adopt, or go through a breeder. I've had my 2 cats since I was 17 years old, living on my own, paycheck to paycheck. Both of my cats were brutally attacked, and I did everything in my power to ensure their health was restored, even if that meant I had no means for myself by the end of it. I did this multiple times, which ended up costing me a whopping $30,000 over the span of their lives. You think I'm crazy? I'd do it again. Cedar, Cheech, and Chong are the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I was the best thing that ever happened to them. The time I spent training, bonding, allowing them into my life in every aspect, and just being there for them, they will always be there for me. So if I have to move, they will move with me, regardless of where I have to go, because that's the commitment I made. Now, Graham and I can relate to this. We have a cat whose knees have cost more than some cars.
In 2024, Tori was living in the community of Port Kells with her boyfriend Trafford. The two had been together for over a year and were living a relatively normal and happy life.
Well, her everyday life, like, she was a hard worker, so she got up every day and went to work. She worked hard with her business, and her and her boyfriend were kind of running it. Well, she always ran the business, right? She did the books. It was her business and only her business. But her boyfriend kind of climbed on board and started working with her, and the dog would jump in the truck and they'd go to work, and pretty much that was it. That she worked hard, right?
Port Kells is a small community located in the northeastern part of Surrey, British Columbia, Canada. It's known for its blend of rural charm and suburban development, making it a unique area within the Lower Mainland. Port Kells is generally considered a safe and quiet community, especially when compared to the more densely populated or urban areas within Surrey. It has a reputation for being a peaceful area with a strong sense of community, largely due to its semi-rural setting and lower population density. Like many suburban and industrial areas, Port Kells may experience some property-related crime, such as theft or vandalism, particularly in its industrial zones. However, these incidents are not typically higher than average for similar areas of Surrey. Violent crime in Port Kells is relatively low, especially in the residential parts of the community. The area's family-oriented atmosphere and active community involvement contribute to its overall safety. Now, the southern part of Port Kells is more industrial, and while these areas can sometimes experience crime related to business operations, this does not usually affect the residential community. Port Kells is policed by the Surrey RCMP. So overall, Port Kells is not considered high crime at all, and is generally seen as a safe and desirable place to live in Surrey. Now, on the street that Tori lived, neighbors described their 182A Street community as, quote, as quiet as a street can be, with the residents as close-knit as possible. Tori's house was situated at the end of a cul-de-sac on 182A Street, bordering the Golden Ears connector in North Surrey. The street consists of 2 blocks of 4-year-old detached homes, another block of homes along 182nd Street, and several more homes on a cul-de-sac that branches off before reaching into a dead end. It's one of the more secluded neighborhoods in Metro Vancouver. The nearest bus stop is several blocks away, and the road leading to 182nd A Street is flanked by woods on one side and an empty, undeveloped lot on the other. Some of the newer homes in the area are valued at $2.5 million. Now, Tori's home was one of 2 older properties on their own acreages. Tori and Trafford lived in a house that was divided into 3 suites. Again, this area is safe, which is why what happened on the evening of June 16th, 2024 was so shocking.
Sunday, June 16th, 2024 was Father's Day, and Aron remembers talking on the phone with Tori that day.
I was really grateful I had got to talk to her on Father's Day. I got to spend about an hour and a half on the phone with her, and told me how much she loved me, wished me happy Father's Day, and we had a real good talk. 10 hours later, she was taken from us.
So the week leading up to June 16th was a busy week for Tori. She had taken that week off from work to go hiking and camping in Garibaldi Provincial Park with friends. After 3 days of camping, she returned home. The weekend began with a celebration, and Tori attended her longtime friend's wedding. On Sunday morning, Tori spoke with Aron and wished him a happy Father's Day. Later on Sunday, Trafford and Tori were at Trafford's grandmother's home for a small birthday party. They returned to their Port Kells home in the early evening hours. It was meant to be a quiet evening as they both had to get back to work on Monday morning, and we all know what it's like getting back to your work schedule after a week off. Earlier, when Tori and Trafford had arrived home, their hands were full from unpacking their car, and as they approached their front door, they noticed that there were some Amazon packages that had arrived while they were out, so they picked up these packages and added them to their already full arms.
I think what happened is they had got back from their day, and there was some Amazon parcels at the door for his birthday and her business and stuff, and they just picked up the parcels and walked in the door with arms full, and somebody kicked the door behind them shut and went upstairs and left the door open.
What Aron means by they left the door open is that when they entered the home, they kicked the door shut behind them. However, because their hands were full, they likely went to put everything down and forgot to lock the door behind them. Around 9 p.m., Tori and Trafford settled onto the couch for some TV and quiet time. At one point, Trafford got up to use the washroom while Tori remained on the couch.
And they were laying on the couch, just getting over the rest of their day and kind of settling in. And Trafford got up to go use the bathroom. And when he was in the bathroom, he heard my daughter screaming, and he ran out, and this guy had her pinned up against the wall, or like cornered, with a knife. And Trafford, screamed at him like, what are you doing? And what's going on? And he ran to the balcony doors and jumped off the balcony, and away he went. But by that time, my daughter had already been stabbed, and she succumbed to her injuries.
When Trafford heard Tori's screams, he ran back to the living room to find a stranger in their home. The man had Tori cornered. She had been stabbed. The assailant then ran out the balcony door and fled. Trafford attempted to render aid to Tori while calling 911. As Trafford waited for help to arrive, Tori tried to calm the situation. Even though she knew that her wound was going to prove fatal, she attempted to make light of the situation. This is something people do in the most unimaginable circumstances. It's almost like we want to take the pain away from our loved ones, even though we are the ones who are hurt. Aron shared with us what he learned about his daughter's final moments.
She knew she was dying. She told Trafford, I'm dying. And then she was a jokester. She cared so much about other people that her last words to him were, well, at least we don't have to go to work tomorrow. You know what I mean? Trying to ease it for him, right? So, yeah, it's just the way she was. Just the type of person she was. Always more concerned about how everyone else is doing than concerned about herself.
Ambulances and police cars raced towards the scene. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's home showed a man hiding between two houses as cruisers ripped past him. This would be one of the investigators' first clues as to who committed this horrific crime. Tori was transported to a local hospital. However, despite life-saving actions being taken, she succumbed to her injuries and tragically died at just 30 years old. As the only witness to the crime, Trafford was taken in to make a statement. His phone was briefly taken away in order to preserve any evidence. Unfortunately, these important steps in the investigation delayed the next of kin notification for Aron and the family until early the following morning. For the Dunn family, Trafford's family, and their friends and community, the reality of what happened the previous evening was only beginning to set in.
Meanwhile, investigators canvassed the neighborhood and pulled CCTV footage from homes in the area. What emerged was a disturbing sequence of events. There's footage that shows a man walking from house to house checking for open doors. He is also seen pacing back and forth as if he were casing the street to find a target. No one on the street recognized the man. In one video, timestamped after the attack, he is calmly walking down the street when police cruisers are racing onto the cul-de-sac. He casually walks between two homes and takes off his white hoodie. One neighbor stated, "He stood right in front of my house and took off a white hoodie. I saw his knife. It was a small machete. He was pretty nonchalant. They found his knife right there."
You can see video of him going in and out of other people's houses. Like there's a video from the police videos of people. I've seen on the news their own personal home security systems picked them up going in and out. So it wasn't a targeted thing for sure.
Early in the investigation, the Surrey RCMP were very clear that this was a random attack and not targeted. Many people in the neighborhood found this really hard to believe. One neighbor stated, "It's crazy it happened in such a quiet neighborhood. The fact that the suspect was just walking casually through our neighborhood is shocking. I don't believe it was random." But as more evidence came forward, the reality started to sink in for other community members, one stating, "Whether it was random or targeted, look at the neighborhood. These are $2.5 million homes. If he can do that here, what's stopping someone from doing the same anywhere? Enough is enough." Another added, "I'm scared shitless." The police need to be commended for their work on this case, because on the evening of the murder, they did arrest a suspect. A press release states the following. Following a search of the area by additional police responders and the Integrated Police Dog Service, a suspect was located and taken into police custody. This suspect remains in custody for an unrelated charge, and the homicide investigation is ongoing. So, a man whose name was not released was found near Tori's home that night, but he was initially charged with a separate, unrelated offense. However, on June 19th, just 2 days later, the RCMP made an additional announcement, and here's that announcement. On June 16th, 2024, the Surrey RCMP responded to a call at a residence near the 9800 block of 182 A Street in Surrey. Upon arrival, members located a woman later identified as 30-year-old Tori Dunn with life-threatening injuries. Despite attempts at life-saving measures, Miss Dunn succumbed to her injuries. A male identified as 40-year-old Adam Troy Mann of Ontario was subsequently taken into police custody. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team, IHIT, took conduct of the investigation and continued to work closely in partnership with the Surrey RCMP, the BC Coroner Service, and the Integrated Forensic Identification Section to advance the investigation. On June 28, 2024, the BC Prosecution Service approved one count of second-degree murder against Adam Troy Mann, who remained in custody in relation to the homicide of Tori Dunn. Quote, "The investigation does not end here. IHIT will continue to work with the Surrey RCMP to collect evidence and find answers, and that was said by Sergeant Timothy Peretti of IHIT. Shortly after the arrest of Adam Mann, British Columbians heard the words that we hear all too often on the news. Adam Mann was a repeat violent offender who had recently been released into the community with conditions to not reoffend, despite having multiple matters before the courts. We're now going to take a quick break. When we return, we will outline what we know about Adam Mann and what Aron hopes to achieve with the Justice for Tori movement.
And we are back. So, who is Adam Mann? And why did the release of his name create so much outrage in British Columbia? Well, it turns out that a photo of Adam Mann had just been on the news 2 weeks before Tori's murder, as he was the main suspect in the stabbing of another woman at a SkyTrain station. At the time, he was an unidentified male, it was just a photo. So, in that incident, on May 26, 2024, shortly after 7 a.m., Surrey RCMP responded to a call in the 10200 block of City Parkway, where they discovered a victim of a stabbing. Later, police released a photo of the suspect we now know to be Adam Mann, holding a purple umbrella. We also now know that Adam Mann was charged on June 17th, the morning after Tori's murder, with aggravated assault related to that stabbing at the SkyTrain station. This was the offense that he was held for the night that he was found near Tori's home after she was murdered. It has also been learned that in March of 2024, Adam Mann was found guilty of possessing a weapon for a dangerous purpose and willfully resisting or obstructing a peace officer. He was also found guilty of breaching a probation order on June 5th. Despite being found guilty of the breach on June 5th and the weapons charges in March, a judge decided to release him back into the community, and 11 days later, Tori was murdered. We will get more into this set of charges in a minute, but first let's talk about what we have learned about Adam Mann. So Adam Mann is a 40-year-old man from Ontario who was born in 1983. A search of Adam Mann's Facebook accounts shows a tall, muscular man with a shaved head and a prison-fit body covered in tattoos, including a collar rocker that says, "Feel my pain." In the photos where he is actually wearing a shirt, he wears a Gucci-labeled tracksuit. He has a video where he counts a stack of $100 bills and others where he's doing push-ups to Tupac songs. There are also videos that he recorded of homeless people fighting each other over drug ripoffs. One photo in his Facebook is particularly disturbing. It was posted in July of 2023, and it depicts a woman sitting inside of a car with a broken nose and a beaten face. She looks terrified. In other videos, he is doing various workouts in what looks like a shelter bedroom or a prison cell. People in the downtown east side have stated that he was a low-level drug dealer and enforcer. Digging deeper into Adam Mann's criminal history paints a picture of a career violent offender who has charges, convictions, prison stays, and releases across Canada, seemingly unable to be held accountable or reformed in any possible way. Now, the release of this information about Adam Mann's history has been shocking for Tori's family. Like many of us, they believed that the criminal justice system was in place to keep us safe. Here is Aron with what he has learned about Adam Mann.
This is a 40-year-old homeless guy living in a tent in Chilliwack, in the bush in Chilliwack, after being released on bail, pending the outcome of a couple of different robberies. Barely missed the criteria for being a diagnosed psychopath. Was 76% likely to reoffend violently in the next 7 years. I know he completed a couple stints in the federal pen there, and while he was inside, he had 70 institutional charges during his time in prison for violence, mostly. And in the past months before that, he racked up a series of new charges for theft, aggravated assault, resisting arrest, breach of probation orders, that were meant to protect community, right? And he was deemed a high risk for future violence, as I said, by corrections officials, right? So My understanding is the prosecution asked the judge not to release him, and for whatever reason, he was released. That's what I know about Adam, man. This is a crime that should never have been allowed to take place. It should have never been. He shouldn't have been on the streets. Like, that's the end of the story. This didn't need to happen.
Here is a sampling of what we have found in regards to Adam Mann's history. Keep in mind, what we are reading does not take into account his breaches of release orders, court no-shows, and probation violations. By the age of 25, Adam Mann had accumulated 22 convictions, including violent offenses involving firearms and robberies. In a 2003 incident, he stabbed a female after she pushed him. The victim required surgery to mend a perforated liver. The injuries were life-threatening and have limited the victim's subsequent physical abilities. She is unable to work and relies on a disability pension. In 2009, Adam was convicted of robbery and various weapons offenses related to a home invasion in Ontario. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison for this, and in his pre-sentencing report, he is described as an unmanageable risk, unsuitable for community supervision, and he described stabbing a female victim as like a knife going through butter. In 2010, he unsuccessfully appealed his 2009 sentence. The Ontario Court of Appeal upheld the 12-year sentence. In December of 2014, he was convicted of assault after spitting on 2 employees at the Atlantic Institution in New Brunswick, where he was incarcerated. The assault occurred after a segregation review board hearing. In 2015, Adam unsuccessfully appealed the 2014 assault conviction, and he represented himself in court because, of course, he did. In 2021, in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Adam was found guilty of the publication of an intimate image without consent. In March of 2024, he was convicted of possessing a weapon for a dangerous purpose and willfully resisting or obstructing a peace officer. On June 5th, 2024, he was found guilty of breaching a probation order. And then just 2 weeks later, on June 19th, 2024, Adam Mann is charged with the second-degree murder of Tori Dunn. Several other documents released painted a picture of Adam Mann's psychological issues. In Canada, as a general rule, an offender is legally entitled to be released into the community at 2/3 of the sentence, unless they are serving a life sentence. This is known as statutory release, and it happens all the time. However, most do not even get to the 2/3 mark because after serving 1/3 of their sentence, offenders convicted of most crimes in Canada can apply for full parole, granted at the discretion of the parole board. It appears that Mann applied for statutory release in 2014 while he was incarcerated for the 2009 home invasion that occurred in Ontario, but was denied. Adam Mann's psychological risk assessment during his 2014 application for full parole highlighted significant concerns, placing him in the high range for both violence and general recidivism. The assessment indicated that offenders with a similar profile to Mann had a high likelihood of committing another indictable offense after release, with a 76% probability of violent recidivism within the next 7 years. Mann's time in prison was marked by frequent disciplinary issues. According to the parole board, he accumulated nearly 70 institutional charges and spent 24 periods in segregation. His behavior behind bars also led to an additional 6 months being added to his sentence due to an assault. Parole records further revealed that Mann's interaction with guards, community residential workers, and staff were often contentious, with some officials stating he barely missed the criteria for being diagnosed as a psychopath. Mann's release history reflects these challenges. Despite being given release on some occasions, his repeated infractions led to multiple suspensions of his statutory release, bringing him back to prison. In March of 2018, the parole board temporarily canceled one of these suspensions, but warned that any further violations would result in his immediate return to custody. However, later that month, another suspension was issued after Adam Mann declared himself a freeman on the land, refusing to recognize any authority. This, combined with his deceptive and argumentative behavior, led to the withdrawal of support from his community residential facility. Despite these setbacks, Mann was granted statutory release again in July of 2019, under strict conditions, including residing at a community residential facility. Now, as an example of how aggressive, argumentative, and contentious Adam Mann can be, we wanted to play a video that he uploaded of himself to Facebook, harassing what appears to be a terrified front desk person at some sort of hotel or motel. In this video, he is with a female companion who also seems to be quite afraid of his outburst.
I'm not the fucking one, man.
So you can.
Yo, listen.
Baby.
Dude, listen, man. I paid for. No, I want my fucking money, man. I swear to. No, I want my money, man.
Maybe I get it.
I want my fucking money. I swear to God, man. I want my money. If I gotta go, I want my money. I'm not the fucking one, bro.
Calm down. Honestly, you're gonna have to.
No, listen, straight up, man.
You'll have to reach this info.
If I gotta go, I want my money. Straight up, I want my money back, man. Straight up, man. I want my money back, man.
Sir, let me try.
I think no, straight up. No. You know what?
Calm down.
You know what? I want my money back, man. I want my fucking money.
I know, baby. I know.
Sir, come on.
So if Aron Mann was released from federal prison on strict conditions in July of 2019 in New Brunswick, what was he doing in British Columbia by 2020? Well, it appears that he completed his federal sentence in March of 2020 and headed out west. This meant that his dealings with the parole board and Corrections Canada were now over, and he had no one to report to. No more parole board, no more probation, no more conditions, no more monitoring. This led to a series of recent events that we spoke about earlier that brought him before the courts in British Columbia multiple times. Despite this, he continued to be released into the community. So this is what we know about his recent time before the BC courts. As stated earlier, in late March of 2024, Aron Mann was convicted of possessing a weapon for a dangerous purpose and resisting a police officer, resulting in a 2-year probation order. By April 26, 2024, Mann was released on bail after being charged with robbery. His bail conditions included a $500 promise to pay, a prohibition on contacting the victims, and a ban on possessing weapons. However, Mann missed his court date related to the robbery charge in late April, leading to a warrant for his arrest. Then on May 29, 2024, Mann was arrested for being found with 3 knives in his possession, breaching his probation order. Keep in mind, he was on release for robbery. Despite this, he was allowed to continue living under the same bail conditions once he addressed the probation breach. So this led to his June 5th, 2024 appearance in Vancouver Provincial Court, where Mann pleaded guilty to the probation breach. This is now 11 days before Tori's murder. He explained to the court that his probation order allowed him to possess knives for food preparation and claimed that he was living in a tent, only coming into the city to pick up a check. He stated to the court, quote, "I feel like because I'm homeless, I'm being targeted here. I take full responsibility for my actions." So during his sentencing hearing, Mann emphasized that the knives were not used in a violent manner, stating, "They weren't used in any violent way or anything. I wasn't trying to be a criminal or a delinquent or anything of that nature. I was just trying to pass through." So the Crown sought a 45-day jail sentence, which the judge acknowledged was not unreasonable, but perhaps a bit harsh considering what occurred here and the expression of remorse. Ultimately, Mann received a 21-day sentence, leaving him with only 10 days to serve after accounting for the time he had already spent in custody. In the final plea, Mann told the judge, quote, "I'm just hoping that you please just understand where I'm coming from. I'm 40 years old. I'm not trying to spend my life in prison. I've spent enough time in jail." The judge described the incident as a, quote, "flagrant breach of a very simple court order," and then he delivered a sentence of just 10 days. And with that, we can assume that Mann was released a few days later, sometime before June 16th, the night that Tori was murdered. However, we may have no way of knowing this because there is now a publication ban on those recent hearings. We have not been able to determine the name of the judge who decided that 10 days and an apology was a sufficient sentence for a career violent offender. Keep in mind, if the judge had given him the 45-day sentence for the weapons breach while he was out on a robbery charge, Tori would still be alive today. Period. The fact that he was given 10 days, of which he served maybe half, is what led him to be skulking around the Port Kells area the night of June 16, 2024. Aron and Tori's family and community have been thrust into this nightmare that they did not ask for. They are now truly seeing the current flaws in the justice system. We asked Aron what his experience has been with the justice system.
Well, honestly, I'm surprised to find out that it leans in the favor of the offender, more than it does the victims, right? And I'm beginning to believe that it does everything in its power to protect itself. We have been denied via a publication ban on the transcripts for the bail hearing and that released them back into the community. Like they're not really. I don't know why there's a publication ban. I think as a father, I deserve answers. I honestly believe there's a publication ban, not to protect integrity of the trial. I think there's a publication ban on because they're so freaking embarrassed about what's happened here, and they don't want any light shine on it. But guess what? I'm just going to shine a lot of light on this. We can't get any information from 1999 forward. I don't think 20 to 24 is where we're really interested in having a look, because there were some things that went on that really put it over the edge where he should not be out. Right? He was choked out somebody in a park in Chilliwack, and he's gotten carrying weapons, and he's breaching probation and failing to appear to, and then they just catch him and let him go.
So we're now going to get into the details of government policy. But first, a disclaimer. We'll do our best to explain everything in straightforward terms. We understand there's a lot of nuance, and we might not be covering everything. This is just a basic overview of what's happening. If you want to explore further, there are plenty of resources available. We are not claiming to be experts on this. So what is catch and release, and how did we get here? Well, in the last decade or so, Canada has pushed towards a less carceral approach to justice, with the belief that more jail does not lead to less crime. Moreover, there is a belief that in Canada, we have over-incarcerated. There are currently 37,000 inmates across the federal and provincial systems in a country of 39.9 million people. So this works out to be about 0.09% of the population, which is less than 1%. Now, this number might seem small, but when you get a little bit more granular, there does exist an over-incarceration inside of this 0.09%. We do see an overrepresentation of Indigenous men and other equity-seeking groups inside of Canada's prisons. So the federal government tried to fix this overrepresentation by changing the laws around bail and sentencing. These fixes have had what the government continues to call unintended consequences, leading critics to now call them catch and release policies.
Canada's criminal justice system, particularly its approach to bail, has been criticized as a catch and release system. This term describes the practice where individuals accused of crimes are arrested, charged, and then released on bail while awaiting trial, even after committing serious offenses. The bail system is intended to balance public safety with the rights of the accused, who are presumed innocent until proven guilty. However, the approach has been controversial, especially when individuals released on bail go on to commit further crimes. In Canadian law, bail decisions focus on whether the accused poses a flight risk, might reoffend, or if their release could undermine public confidence in the justice system. Judges or justices of the peace can set bail conditions like curfews, no contact orders, or substance prohibitions. However, concerns arise when individuals breach these conditions or commit further offenses while on bail. To address these concerns around bail being unfair to certain populations, Canada introduced two significant bail reform bills. Bill C-75, enacted in 2019, which was aimed to modernize the bail process and reduce the overrepresentation of vulnerable populations such as Indigenous people and those with mental health issues in pretrial detention. The bill encouraged the use of non-monetary bail conditions and emphasized that pretrial detention should be a last resort. Bill C-75 argues that putting someone in jail while awaiting trial is against their constitutional rights, even if they are a person with a long criminal history or a history of violent offenses. However, Bill C-75 led to disastrous results in the years after the pandemic. Crime in Canada was at an all-time low in 2014, down from its peak in 1998. But since 2014, crime has seen an upward spike. While it hasn't risen to the same heights that we saw in the 90s, violent crime is now up 50% since 2015. So in 2022, the premiers of the provinces banded together and begged the federal government to fix the issues with Bill C-75. Eventually, Ottawa responded with a newly amended bill known as Bill C-48. Bill C-48, passed in 2023, responded to increasing public concern about violent crime and repeat offenders. The bill strengthened the reverse onus provisions for serious offenses, such as those involving firearms or intimate partner violence, making it more difficult for individuals accused of such crimes to be released on bail. This means that in certain cases, rather than the Crown having to prove someone does not deserve bail, now the accused has to prove why they deserve it. While this was supposed to address the problem, it clearly hasn't. And it also has a narrow focus on violent offenders rather than all repeat offenders. Another notable change in Canada's criminal justice approach has been the removal of many mandatory minimum sentences. Mandatory minimums are fixed sentences that judges must impose for specific crimes, regardless of the case's context. Critics argued that these minimums restricted judicial discretion, resulting in disproportionately harsh sentences. Research also indicated that mandatory minimums did not effectively deter crime, as offenders often do not consider the consequences before committing offenses, and longer sentences did not necessarily reduce recidivism. Moreover, mandatory minimums contributed to the overrepresentation of marginalized groups in the prison system. Removing these sentences aimed to restore greater flexibility to judges, allowing them to tailor sentences to the specifics of each case while addressing systemic inequities and working towards a more equitable justice system. You will notice that in both bail reform and the removal of mandatory minimums, very little wording is given to public safety and the rights of victims. Instead, the entire focus is making life more manageable for those accused or convicted of crime.
British Columbia tried to address some of these issues by creating the REVOI program. The Repeat Violent Offender Intervention Program, or REVOI, was initiated by British Columbia in 2021 and aimed to tackle the issue of repeat violent offenders by enhancing public safety through targeted interventions. This program focuses on individuals with a documented history of serious violent crimes who are at a high risk of reoffending. The central feature of the REVOI program is its targeted intervention approach, which concentrates on repeat violent offenders. These individuals are subjected to more intensive supervision than typical probation or parole conditions. This heightened supervision is designed to monitor and control their behavior in the community more effectively. Now, the main objective of the REVOI program is to enhance public safety by preventing further crimes, which is great. But in speaking with people who are in the industry, we have learned that the REVOI program has a limited number of spaces. This means that there are not enough spaces in the REVOI program for all of those who should be in it. The board that monitors the REVOI program often turns down candidates, believing that they do not fit the criteria. Another issue with the REVOI program is proving someone is violent. Most people plead assaults down to mischief or lesser crimes, so a person's record may be filled with pled down mischief convictions, making them appear less violent than they are. So the question is, did Aron Dunn fit the criteria for the REVOI program?
It's no secret that an overwhelming volume of cases is straining Canada's justice system, exacerbated by a shortage of judges, Crown prosecutors, bailiffs, and sheriffs. Crown prosecutors face large caseloads with limited resources, leading to expedited cases and less thorough handling of repeat offenders. It's all very complex. Judges must balance public safety with the rights of the accused, but are constrained by legal limits on sentencing and a lack of rehabilitation programs. This often results in shorter sentences or insufficient bail conditions. Additionally, the justice system struggles with inadequate mental health and addiction resources, which are crucial for addressing the root causes of criminal behavior. The Jordan ruling further presses the system by imposing strict timelines from when a person is charged to when they need to be convicted, creating a volatile situation in an already overwhelmed system. Now, we know that's a lot to take in, so before we move on, we want to take a moment to acknowledge the Crown's restorative justice workers, probation officers, victim services workers, police officers, sheriffs, corrections workers, parole board members, and even politicians who are working hard to keep us safe. We know your work is hard and you're showing up every day. We see you and the good work that you were doing.
The story of Tori Dunn's murder has traveled from coast to coast to coast in Canada, and a team of people has gathered around the Dunn family to support them.
When you write the story, it's not just me, right? It's like, I would like it to be like, her father and family, right? And friends that are on this crusade. It's not just me. And sometimes it comes across like it's just me, but I've got a team of people working with me that we have weekly Zoom meetings and what's our next way to go and what are we going to do this week? And so there's a team of us, and I don't want the rest of them to be forgotten. I guess we're just trying to get people on board. We want to keep the fight alive. We don't want to get it lost in the news cycle. We're just wanting this to keep the story alive, so that she doesn't get forgotten, and this case doesn't get forgotten, and this injustice doesn't get forgotten. There's not much I can do for Tori anymore, but if I can prevent, or me and my family, if we can prevent another family from having to go through the hell we're going through, we're going to do everything in our power to do that.
Aron has had all kinds of people, from retired judges to lawyers to politicians, reach out to him, including the Premier of British Columbia, David Eby, and the federal opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre, all promising change.
I've had David Eby's reached out to me, talked to him personally on the phone a couple times, the secretary lots of times. Eleanor Sturkle from the MLA in South Surrey has been really supportive of us. She was an ex-police officer at one point, or RCP officer, so she's been very helpful. I've got a call from Pierre Poilievre, and telling me the change is coming. And still a politician, right? Yeah, they're still politicians. So,
in our initial conversation with Aron, he made one thing clear to me: that he didn't want this to be about politics. He wants this to be about Tori and the system that failed her, and how we can change things. Climbing this giant mountain is not easy, and Aron is fielding calls all the time. During our 40-minute conversation, his phone went off multiple times, as you heard.
You can't imagine how overwhelming it is when this happens, to have people, like my phone just blows up from the moment I'm awake till the time I go to bed, right? I'm doing interviews like this every day. Yeah, there's a lot. It's tiring, and I've just recently invoked the help of my sister, or both my sisters and my nieces, to help me with this, because it's getting too much for me right now.
Another frustration that Aron is facing is that the courts are refusing to give him the documents involving Aron Mann. Some are under a publication ban, and others he is only allowed to listen to at a Vancouver courthouse, but he currently lives in Saskatchewan.
Our family wants some answers, like what went wrong here? What was it? The judge? Was it the prosecution? Like, was it the law? Was it the system? Was it 20% someone's fault and 60% someone else? I want to know exactly what happened. I want the transcripts that I'm not allowed to have because there's a publication ban. I can go and listen to them in a courthouse, but only in Vancouver, only with headphones. Can't record nothing.
News reports indicate that a publication ban on Aron Mann's past court cases limits what can be shared about the evidence and details from his bail hearings. On July 19, 2024, Judge Andrea Davis in Surrey Provincial Court updated this ban, further clarifying what information cannot be published, broadcast, or shared until a preliminary inquiry happens, Mann is released, or his trial ends.
As Aron mentioned, he has been in contact with Premier David Eby of British Columbia. Eby has stated, quote, "With the Dunn case, it's pretty clear that the amendments we lobbied for and got were not followed by the court. My heart goes out to the family and friends of this remarkable person who has been killed. We all want the same thing here, for the person responsible to be brought to justice. In this case, the Crown said, 'Judge, please do not do this.' And the judge made the decision to release this person back to the community where he is alleged to have committed another horrific crime." Now, the provinces and territories did send another letter to the federal government urging them to review Bill C-48. Arif Virani, the federal Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, did issue a response, In it, he talks a lot about gun and gang violence. This has nothing to do with Tori because she was attacked by a stranger with a knife. However, at the very end, he states, "We listened to the provinces and territories when they asked for changes to the criminal code. Now they need to step up and enforce the law. Provinces are responsible for the administration of bail, and more needs to be done to make sure that police and prosecutors have the tools that they need for effective monitoring and enforcement." Now, this is actually true. According to the Government of Canada website, the federal government sets criminal laws while provinces enforce them and handle most criminal cases. The federal government manages sentences of 2 years or more, while the province deals with the shorter sentences and community sentences.
We know that many of our listeners have been following Tori's story. Based on our conversations that we've had with you, it's clear that you really want to help. So we asked Aron what our listeners can do to help this cause and truly get justice for Tori.
Well, the biggest thing I think they can do is sign on to the petition, but also share it, make some noise. It surprised me how many people hadn't heard the story yet. Like I was shocked. I guess the listeners, if they want to help, could share the petition. Help us not let Tori get forgotten. We're looking at a public inquiry into this case, so we want answers.
We will be linking the change.org petition that has been started by Tori's family in order to get answers in the show notes of this episode. We ask our listeners to be active true crime consumers and help this family out by taking a few moments out of your day to sign it and share it with your community. A candlelight vigil was held for Tori Dunn in Surrey Bend Regional Park, and a large crowd gathered to honor Tori. Then, 3 days later, Tori was laid to rest at the Valley View Funeral Home in Surrey. Hundreds of people attended as a light rain fell on the late June day.
Her vigil was 300 plus people at her vigil. The funeral was a big funeral, and for such a young person, she had a lot of friends reached out, and a lot of her clients showed up at the vigil and the funeral, which isn't always something that you see, right? Like some of her clients from her landscaping business, or where she got her shrubs and nurseries and different things. I met all kinds of people that loved her, right?
We asked Aron if he could help our listeners understand the impact that Tori's murder has had on her family and friends.
Well, she was a great loss for everybody, and nobody. You certainly don't expect to outlive your child, and or your grandchild in my mom's case, or your cousin in my niece's cases at 30 years old. But as a father, you don't expect to lose them at all. You expect to be the one to go first, right? And I'd lost my dad a couple of years ago, but he was sick going into it, and so that was a heck of a lot easier than what I'm going through now, because not only do you never ever suspect that's going to happen, that your child is going to go before you do, when they go in such a violent way, that should have never allowed to be taken place. So it's a double punch to the gut. It's like you lose your daughter, and as you're trying to grieve the loss of your daughter, there's a lot of anger around it too at the same time, because so most of my days I bounce between crying and fighting, for justice for her. It's just a lot to take on, right? And her friends are devastated. Her best girlfriend got married. She was supposed to be the maid of honor at that wedding, right? And so they sent me a picture of her maid of honor dress and the chair they had set up for her, and everybody's grieving in their own way. And for me personally, I suppose it's my way of grieving with it so far is to fight for this justice, because it keeps me focused and busy for time throughout the day. But she will be missed by everybody that knew her. Like, I don't think you could find a person that could say a bad word about her. I mean, that's there's not very many people. I know that could never be said about myself. There's going to always be somebody I've done something to or pissed somebody off, but she was one of those people that she came into your life, you were blessed, and yeah, it's a sad situation.
We would like to thank Aron Dunn and Tori's friends, family, and community for trusting us with your story. We will be following this story to the very end. We hope that some change comes soon to the system so that we can all regain trust in the judicial system and feel safe in our communities. We will link the Dunn family petition in our show notes and on our social media. We will also post updates about the case on our social media as it makes its way through the system. If you feel passionate about this type of reform, we do encourage you to give the petition a read and a sign. Thank you all for joining us for this episode of True North True Crime. We will be back soon with a new episode, so until then, stay safe, everyone.